This episode is brought to you by New Moon Wishing, a self-care guidebook for wishful thinkers. Please see the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology podcast. I'm your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here again.
Thanks so much for joining me again. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about one of the houses in astrology, the 8th house.
Yes. Deep dive into the watery 8th house.
A deep dive into the watery 8th house. So typically, I suppose one would start with the 1st house, but it just didn't seem interesting enough. So that's why I thought, let's do the 8th house first, because it's quite a deep and dark house, and it's got a lot of things in it that we're going to explore, many themes, and I want to say it's one of those that you really do need to know how to interpret, but many people just get around it, I think.
It's weird. In doing research for this episode, and, I didn't think I needed to do too much research, but then, you want to refresh yourself on keywords and whatnot. And I opened a few of the older books I have, and I noticed, they really do gloss right over it. They're like, sex, death, taxes, LOL. And I'm like, what? And then some of the newer books and some of the deeper sort of mythical psychological astrologers, the Liz Green types and the Howard Sasportas, who I'll be quoting later, they do really dive deep into it, and they talk about Persephone and the underworld and whatnot, which is incredibly relevant. But it's funny how some of them were just like, yada, yada, yada.
I know, because why is this? Is it because we like to keep astrology light and upbeat and positive?
I mean, some people do.
Some people do. But then on the other hand, you get people who like to go deeper and explore perhaps the darker side of life. And these are the things that are living in that 8th house.
Yeah. Oh, so I guess this is where we should put a trigger warning. We will be talking about sex and death, and maybe even taxes in this episode. So if you find any of those, and who doesn't, disturbing, fair warning.
That's great.
Yeah.
So each of the houses has main keywords associated with it, main themes that go on in the houses. And of course, the houses are the areas of life where things occur.
Yeah.
So for the 8th house, we have quite a few themes, don't we?
We do. Well, there's the aforementioned sex, death, and taxes, of course.
Yes.
But the reason for and that sounds a little glib when we say it that way, but the reason that those things are grouped together, not just that they are taboo subjects that you should not talk about at the dinner table.
Exactly.
Right.
Taboo is the word,
taboo.
Yes.
And there's also the occult is in there, religion is in there. Marriage is in there, not in the sense of your marriage partner and love, but the contract of marriage.
Right.
The binding contract that makes two individuals one individual in the eyes of the state. The legal contract, the binding contract, and also the sense of you're uniting your kingdoms, or you're uniting your houses in the old, Game of Thrones kind of sense.
Yes,
right?
You're getting married to make it's like a chess move.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's a binding thing that results in, children usually, or at least the combining of funds and households and resources, exactly. Yeah. And so I will jump and quote a little bit from this book by Howard Sasportas, The 12 Houses. And he says that the 8th house has many labels. We'll talk also about why, since it's opposite the 2nd house, which is the house of your own values. Yeah. The 8th house is often called the house of other people's values, or other people's property, OPP, the old rap song. Anyway, and so planets and signs that we find in the 8th house can be interpreted in terms of your business partners, your marriage, your inheritances, and of course, death and the causes of death, and perhaps illnesses and things like that. But it's also got to do with your debts, and that's why taxes, your resources to pay those debts, where those inheritances, or where your other people's money comes into, or goes out from your
I think this is important, that the payments you have to make for taxes and so on in the 8th house, or back to your family, or whatever it is, are payments for funds you have already received. So you're not getting taxed if you don't earn a salary.
Yeah.
So you don't have this thing. But once you've been paid your salary from wherever you are, that's when you trigger this 8th house of having to pay a portion back.
Yeah.
Same with insurances. You have to have paid in first to receive something back.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the house of what is shared.
Yes.
And in the house of like, in the 7th house, for example, that's like marriage as a union of people, and that's your partner being reflected in your chart and things like that. But the 8th house is much more of like the transactional and sort of operational and almost like national version of that.
Yes.
The legality of it.
What resources you have access to. So traditionally, wasn't it your husband's money technically, but it's because you were married that you get access to these resources.
Right.
And it's because your father was who he was that you get access to those resources.
Right. And with inheritance, it's because someone has died that you gain access to those resources, which is what has, why sex and death have something in common. It's because they were related
the beginning and the end.
And how resources are passed along and shared. So the 8th house, it kind of expands and elaborates what has begun in a partnership in the 7th house, whether that's your marriage or a business partnership. And this is where things get hashed out, like your values as they pertain to your partner, your resources as they pertain to the partner. Who has more resources? How are you going to blend them? Do you have 2 bank accounts? Do you merge everything and just begin sharing?
Tricky.
Exactly. Taboos even. And Howard Thesportis has a few questions that he says these things come up and conflicts inevitably ensue when these kind of values begin to be hashed out in any partnership. So I have money, you have money, how shall we spend it and how shall we save it? And whose values may win out over the other person, because not everyone is going to come into a relationship with the same idea about saving or spending or even anything to do with money. That is one of the main conflicts. And sex and money are like what are the bigger arguments with regard to marriage and children. He says another question is how you should, like, do you punish your children? Do you strike your children? Do you have like a taboo against doing that? And who's going to win if you are a mother and a father, or two fathers, two mothers, whatever. But like who wins in the argument about how to raise children, and should children be spoiled or should they be punished?
Spanked
exactly. And even with friends, like the friends that you inherit through your partner. If I hate that guy, why are you friends with him? These kinds of arguments. Like it's a shared resource now. It's no longer just your husband's friends. Now
it's tricky to navigate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all very
especially
tricky.
In those early years.
Right. Yeah, where you're just getting to know, before you've blended everything successfully or not successfully, or you've decided what should be separate. Does he have, nights off to do things with his friends and you have nights to do things with your friends, or do you blend everything, or do you now only hang out with other couples? And what about that single friend who just keeps bringing over some, the tramp of the week or whatever?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what happens when people get divorced, and who gets
who gets the dog?
Who gets the dog, but also who gets the friend who's now divorced and single, right? Or whose friends go with which partner when there's an acrimonious divorce.
Yes.
You had friends, like a shared group of friends, and all of a sudden, do we go to Joe's place or to Carol's now that they're divorced? And when we talk to them, do we gossip about the other? Like when they say, "Oh, have you seen Joe?" And do you want to lie? It all becomes very.
Oh, how about this one? Did you know he was having an affair?
Oh, snap! Right? Exactly.
Yes.
Oh,
or she, but
Yeah. Oh, I got caught up in that conversation once, and boy, did that lead to some breaking up of friendships.
This is it. It's the death of relationships, really, isn't it? Because particularly, you see, when you get married, you kind of join the friend group, whether or not you like them.
Right.
And do you like everybody? Of course not. But when you get divorced, it's the same problem.
Yeah.
I mean, the family's quite straightforward, but your friends group that you maybe have known for 10 or 15 years, where do they stand?
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And these resources that get split, and who gets the dog, that's the big, I mean, the kids I think is pretty straightforward, but
usually
I understand this who gets the dog is the big deal, you know, because it really is a lot of work.
Oh yeah, totally. I even
who gets the cat?
Personal things, but I've got a friend who like went through a divorce. There was a pet involved, and the kids want the pet. The kids live with mom, but now one of the kids doesn't want to live with mom anymore, and the kid wants the pet. And it's like, no, that was a family pet. You're a child, you don't get the pet, you know? And it's caused a lot of problems.
A lot of navigating, isn't it?
It's crazy.
It's
and it's interesting that you say the death of the because it's the death of a partnership. It's the death of it's like the end of an era.
Yes.
And all these things get divided up and everything changes. It's
yes.
Yeah. It's like the death card in Tarot. It's not necessarily death, but it's transformation of everything.
This is it. Yeah. And I think the thing is with these things that go down in the 8th house, they didn't just happen today. They've been a long time coming.
Yes.
You know, you don't get married on a whim. You don't get divorced on a whim either.
No.
You know, the couple of years, it's been a long time coming. It's been degrading or whatever the situation is.
Decaying, if you will.
Decaying, if you will. And then there's this split. And of course, if we talk about real death as well, physical death, that's the same thing too. I mean, sometimes you get run over by a bus, but very often we see it coming.
Yeah.
But it still happens, and you still have to then divide the plunder, as it were, right?
Yeah, right.
There's
exactly.
the
plunder, the resources.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and then the kids fighting over the resources that...
Yes. But Mom said I could have that au moi, you know. Right. And... this sort of thing, or whatever it is.
Oh, and it could be the most minor things too. Like there's the tiniest things, all the way up to and including kingdoms. You know, I mean, who gets what? Like I don't know
who gets the stuff.
I don't know who's watching House of the Dragon right now. The prequel to Game of Thrones. It's so good, but it literally hinges on the deathbed. You know, the deathbed mutterings of a senile old man, and how that brings these two houses, you know, into conflict. His wife and his daughter now are like the heads of their own households, and now they begin this like epic battle, and it's all over like the deathbed mutterings of the dead, the dying patriarch.
This is it.
Yeah.
And I do think astrologically, if you've got a lot of planets in your 8th house, you're going to deal with these things a lot of the time.
For sure.
And also that, in a way, as adults, it makes sense to plan ahead for the end. What is the exit strategy?
Right.
And this is where you get round to writing a will. Right. What is your exit strategy? Yeah. And of course, we don't talk about these things.
No.
They are taboo.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen when you get divorced?
Right.
Well, of course, in South Africa, you have an antenuptial contract that you sign prior to getting married.
Everyone. Oh, wow.
Well, you don't have to. It's an optional.
Okay. Yeah.
But the other option is if you just get married straight up, then the woman remains a minor all her life and cannot open a bank account or do business in her own right. So
Seriously?
you have,
Wow.
So you have this antenuptial contract that you set up beforehand, and you have to state within it that whatever you're bringing to the marriage is, you know, his and hers, but jointly going forward, it's all 50%.
Yeah.
And if it's not stated, you can imagine how that unfolds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
I know.
And that brings us to another thing in Howard Sisfortis's book. He talks about the abduction of Persephone in Greek mythology by Pluto into or Hades into.
Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about
that. So Persephone was a young maiden on the cusp of womanhood, and her mother. And I'm going to mix the Greek and Roman names.
Yeah.
I won't be able to help myself. Anyway, Demeter was the Greek name of her mother. I cannot remember the Roman whatever. Anyway, Persephone, Demeter, they're happy in the forest, whatever. And Hades comes up from the underworld and falls in love. This is the ancient way of saying it. He falls in love. The modern telling is, it's more of like a rape thing. I think of it more as seduction. Right. And I think that that's a very 8th house thing.
Yes.
Is it a willingness? Is it, did she or didn't she,
yes.
Whatever. But he takes her down to the underworld, and her mother casts the entire, world into darkness. She is so bereft at the abduction of her daughter that she casts the world into, because she's the goddess of the harvest and the grain, right? So she makes all the crops fail, and it's a perpetual like winter, right? until the other gods get together and they're like, okay, we can't have this. Like we have to hash out a deal with Hades. Like this is not acceptable. We can't just have like perpetual winter. Come on. And so they agree to take Persephone 50%. So they split the time with her. She gets to go and live with Hades as his wife and the queen of the underworld. Like, it's not just like she's being kept in shackles. I mean,
right.
It was probably a pretty cushy, marriage, I would think. And she got to rule the underworld down there with him. And then the rest of the year, the other half of the year, spring and summer, she would be up with her mother, and the flowers would bloom and the crops would yield, and all was right with the world. And that's why we have the seasons.
Is that right?
Yeah. But it's interesting. If you've seen the movie, the Ridley Scott film from 1982, I believe, 83, like early 80s, Legend, with Tim Curry as basically Hades. I can't remember the actual name, but with the giant horns and the awesomeness, and he kidnaps the beautiful young innocent maiden and kidnaps her to do that. Tom Cruise is in it too, but whatever. That's not why you would watch this movie. It's Tim Curry. I'm totally Team Curry. Yeah, but he's basically Hades capturing Persephone. And there's this wonderful scene where he's got her like all dressed out, like, because she's like in white the whole, very virginal the whole time. There's like, unicorns frolicking in the forest above. And then when he takes her down to the underworld, he presents her with this black lace wedding dress, and she's got like black lipstick, and she's pretending to go along with it at first, and then she screams at him, and it's a very wonderful. It's a wonderful symbolic.
It's an 8th house movie.
It's a very 8th house movie. And in the end, Tim Curry has this wonderful line about, like, without a little bit of darkness, there could be no light. And it's, he gets the last word, of course. Yeah. So that's the 8th house. If anyone wants to see what the 8th house is all about, go watch Legend.
Yeah. So we do have some other themes in that going on in the 8th house. The one thing I want to talk about here is to talk about organ donation.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Now, that's in the 8th house, along with surgery. Anytime they're slicing and dicing, it's an 8th house issue.
Interesting.
But organ donation is resources of others. So if you have a heart transplant from somebody so that you get your heart replaced so you can live, somebody has to die for that to happen.
Right.
Now, it's not always the case that someone's going to die, because if you get a kidney transplant, but by the same token, surgery is involved, and you are benefiting from resources of others who are donors, and very often anonymous.
Right.
And it all begins, I think, basically with blood transfusions. I don't know if most people maybe have had these or not, I don't know. But some anonymous person who is clearly strongly 8th house has donated already, so you can benefit.
Absolutely.
And it goes into all those, what they call coronas. Cornea transplants, and of course egg and sperm donation too fall into this house.
Right.
And it's not
the gift of life.
Yes. So it's not the first thing you mention when you say, you've got a plant in the 8th house. Yeah. Oh, you're likely to get a sperm donation or give an egg donation.
Right.
And I think, but this is where it's happening. And astrologically, if someone's bringing it up for you and saying, we're going down this road, this is where you're going to be looking for these items, because they are resources, valuable resources.
Yeah.
Donated, that you cannot buy them. I know that.
There's the black market, but there's another 8th house concept of black market. Like the underground.
The kidney
transfer of resources and drugs and prostitution and
all of these things are 8th house things.
So 8th house, yeah.
So I think that, because again, these are generally not for dinner party conversations. Right. One does not chat about it at your kid's birthday party either. Yeah. So this is, although perhaps a lot of things are taboo, these are just things we just don't talk about in what we would call polite conversation.
Right. And I mean, that's the unfortunate thing too, because a lot of these things, especially in the modern world, should be talked about. You should have living will. You should talk about these things with your children.
Have a will.
So that there's a will. So there's not just, everyone's free for all, or, the opposite of the free for all, when everyone's just fighting over the resources.
Yes. Who gets the house?
In the, to fight over it. And that's the last thing you want as a parent, to think that your kids are going to be fighting and perhaps having falling outs and not speaking to each other for decades or ever again because of your resources. But at the same time, organ donation is another one. If you don't write it down in I don't know how it is in all countries, in the US, there's a tiny percentage of people who donate organs. And in Canada, you at least get asked when you do your
You have to actually opt out in Canada.
which is that
I believe.
Yeah, I think that was discussed. I'm not sure if that's absolutely
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
But I do remember when I applied for my BC ID card, because I don't drive, so I don't have a driver's license. But maybe with the driver's license it is opt out. I remember the little card came when I was filling out the application for my ID card, and I was like, oh, cool, that's great that the card is even there for you to fill out.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know if it was an opt-in or opt-out thing. I was going to opt in regardless, because I think it's a great thing to do,
Yes,
and
yes.
more people,
This is it.
if
And
possible, everyone should do it, unless.
And this is one of those things too, this organ donation thing that, when you die, they can harvest your organs.
Yeah.
That you need to tell your family who are going to be left behind beforehand.
Exactly.
That I'm donating my body to science, and I'm telling you now.
Yeah, because
so that they are aware and they don't have to make the decision.
They won't have the time, first of all, usually, to make that decision unless you've actually put it in writing beforehand, because just to be completely blunt about it, bodies decay pretty quickly.
Yes.
You need to jump on, the if you're taking organs, you need to put them on ice. You need to do the operation quickly. And if your kids don't know that that's what you wanted,
don't burden them with it.
Don't burden them with trying to make the decision. Go, what would she have wanted in that moment when they're in, grieving and in denial? And no.
This is the thing, and it's your natal 8th house shows how well prepared you are going to be about your instructions on these things.
Absolutely. And here's an interesting personal story about that. The one person I know in my life/family who had, and I say had because she passed away in 2018, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, had 4 planets in the 8th house, which is quite a lot.
Yes.
She had the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn all in the 8th house. And I think 3 of them in Sagittarius and Saturn in Scorpio. So in the final degree of Scorpio, which is an interesting thing altogether. Anyway, but she had, and this is another thing that so I'll jump around a little bit, but Howard Zisfortis, one of the things he says is that people who have a lot of planets in the 8th house, they may be the kind of person who goes through many different stages of their life, many deaths and rebirths, so to speak, throughout the course of their life, where they're like Madonna, where she's constantly reinventing herself. But in my grandmother's case, she renamed herself. She changed her actual name a couple of times, and not her last name by marriage, which she also did, but her first name, she went through an entire 20-year period in the middle of her life where she went by a completely different name. And then later in life, when she married her final spouse and the man she was with when she passed away, she had gone back to her original name, and she even kind of thought of herself as almost a different person in those 20 years, which is kind of unique. But it really, when I read that, I was like, oh my God, that reminded me that she had so many planets in the 8th house. She was incredibly independent, but she was an artist, and she lived in a school bus, and had traveled around with her house on her back like a hermit crab for many, many years. And she had, because she was always, never knew who would be around if something happened to her, she had to think about, I'm traveling by myself, I'm a woman alone, this is, in not necessarily the best parts of the country even, she would be traveling by herself. And so she actually had a note pinned to the inside of her camper door.
Yes.
That was like a do not resuscitate note.
That's another thing.
Right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, as her granddaughter, this was horrifying to me. The idea of talking about death with my beloved grandmother, and the fact that this was right there,
Well, some people get it tattooed on their chest, DNR.
Great idea.
So the hospital can see it.
It was kind of it was a different time, but who knows, these days maybe she would. But yeah, that was right there. She did not want any confusion about that. Yeah. And she would talk about all these things. She would talk about death, talk about sex, way more than I would have liked as a kid.
Yes.
But yeah, that was totally her personality, was just bringing all the taboo topics to the table.
Yeah.
She had nude pictures all over that she had drawn, nude little sculptures that she did everywhere in her home. Yeah. And people would come over and be like, okay.
I know, it's 12th house, you kind of want to draw the curtain. Well,
8th house, yeah, exactly.
But we all have this part of our life that you're not necessarily talking about, though, let's face it, you're not.
Yeah.
But it's there, and we all have to face it at some point.
Yeah.
So this is the 8th house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Owen, so let's have a look at some of the planets. Well, most of the planets in the 8th house, and give our listeners a bit of a clue in, because not everyone's going to have planets in the 8th house. Not everyone's going to have all the planets in the 8th house for sure. Mm-hmm. So we'll just go through a couple of them. Yeah, that sounds great. To start with. So I do have some keywords here, and I'm just going to go through it lightly. So first up, when the sun is in the 8th house, transformation is one of the keywords. So it's transformation of identity, and this is just what you were talking about with your grandmother.
The death and rebirth of the personality, and the reinventing yourself.
Reinventing yourself.
Yeah, the caterpillar and the butterfly.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a huge thing, because the sun is, of course, yourself. Mm-hmm. And then your intimacy, which is really what we're talking about. That's a polite way of saying it. And your deep connections you have with others, because there are only so many people in this world that you're going to be intimate with. And then, of course, inheritance is a big one when the sun is there, because you are likely to receive inheritance, particularly from your father, because the sun represents your father. Mm-hmm. And which is a bit of a moot point, because many people will inherit from their parents anyway, with or without a planet here. Yeah. But when the planet is there, it's bringing it to a focus that it's either a large inheritance or there are things connected to it.
Right, and it might not even be physical resources. It could even be you inherit your career or your outlook on life in a way. Because just going back to my grandmother, that was an interesting thing about her father. Sort of her parents divorced early when she was young, and she always had this sort of like just golden image of her father, even though she knew he had kind of been an alcoholic and that they probably broke up for valid reasons and stuff like that. But he was
still her hero.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And she went on to be a creative writer and an artist, and all her life she was like a quote unquote starving artist, and and that had been his ideal. He was like a journalist and a writer, and that was her mentor in a way.
Sun in the 8th house, yes. Yeah. So if we now look at the moon in the 8th house, some keywords I have here is emotional depth.
Yeah.
They like to go deep.
Yep.
And how do you feel about that? And and all
not
the rest.
Someone to be trifled with.
Yes. Yeah. Psychic sensitivity, whereas I think the mood can change things, because the moon is your mood and your feelings. And what are we saying? You have to be in the mood for whatever it is you're going to be doing next. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, right?
Right.
And then we have family resources, where you're leaning on your families or your ancestral or your cultural beginnings.
And this might be the influence of the mother versus the father, like the moon versus the sun.
Yeah. But this is someone who says, well, I love our cooking. We have to still cook our Iranian dish or our Spanish dish or our what have you, because
the cultural heritage.
You have to acknowledge the ancestors.
Right.
And and I heard a good quote the other day that tradition is peer pressure from the ancestors.
Nice.
So
there's a good one.
Yeah. So which it is, because you think, well, we've always done Christmas like this. This is where we do it. Why? Because my mother did it, my grandmother did it, and we're going to do it now. And if you don't question it, you perpetuate it.
Yeah, for sure.
So those are just some thoughts on the moon there in the 8th house. Let's have a look at Mercury in the 8th house. Yeah. So this might have been her name changing. I can't remember if you said she had Mercury there.
Yeah, totally.
So your Mercury is, of course, your name anyway.
Yeah.
So communication about the unseen.
Yep. Yeah.
So we've got psychic abilities here, getting messages through from the other side, from the dead, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Writing about the occult, talking about the occult.
Yes.
She was an astrologer as well.
Right. All those darker things too.
Yeah.
This is someone with an investigative mind.
Yes.
So even investigative journalists or sleuths or that sort of people who go and private eyes, this is the sort of thing, because they are quite happy to do that.
Digging the dirt.
Digging it up.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. They know where to dig even. Or even
where the bodies are buried.
Where the bodies are buried, yes.
Yeah.
And then financial discussion. So this is a good place. If you've got Mercury in the 8th house, it's a good place for a financial advisor. Or an agent, because Mercury is your agent. So if you actually have Mercury in that 8th house, you are likely to be good with this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Finances and taxes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And even maybe find it interesting. Not that I do, but I mean,
Someone has to.
Someone has to.
Yeah.
And really, if you're going to employ a tax consultant or an accountant even, have one with Mercury in the 8th house, because they will dig deep. Yeah.
Not that we're advocating astrological discrimination at all.
No, not at all.
No.
But this business of changing your name, that is very interesting. And then she still went back, but she tried it on for size. Yeah.
And she felt like she was a different person that whole time.
Amazing, right? So let's have a look then at Venus in the 8th house. So some keywords I have here is deep love.
Yep. Yeah.
On all, it's not just Barbie love, it's deep love.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, you have shared finances. This has to be the thing that you're bringing to the table, that you are bringing your shared finances and you are happy to share whilst you're in that relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My grandmother, I have her up here, I'm glancing at it. She was married a few times. I'm not going to say a number, but it was more than the average, let's say.
Right.
And every time, it was definitely a merging of the resources. She was in love, and she wasn't just like, oh, let's just, have a little surface. No, it was every relationship was all in. And the final relationship that she was in, it was like she took his name, which she hadn't done every time because she's a liberated woman of the, whatever. But yeah, all in. And then like later in her life, because she died at 91, I believe, and suffered some cognitive decline, as we say. And it came out that she actually had quite the jealous streak that we did not know. The rest of her life, we thought, free spirit, whatever, But nope. Towards the end, she was very, very jealous and very possessive. Interestingly, that kind of came out of the woodwork. Yeah.
But this business of, do you make a joint bank account with Venus in the 8th? You're going to.
Yeah.
I was married all those years and we had a joint bank account. Not that I've got Venus in the 8th, but it just made sense.
Yeah,
but that's how you did it back then.
Yeah.
And then aesthetic transformation. This is where you are beautifying through transformation, and you get transformed because you are attending to the aesthetics and how things look.
Yeah.
And,
not going to be happy with just the thing off the rack as it is.
Yeah. Or, they've got silk sheets on the bed and it's to do with making an environment that is pleasing and beautiful for...
you're going to know it's their home. You're not going to walk in and it's...
Think, who lives here?
It couldn't be anyone else's. It's definitely theirs.
Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting thing. That
Definitely.
All right. So let's have a look at Mars in the 8th house, which is one of its own houses. So this is good and strong here.
For sure.
Passion and conflict.
Yep.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
This is, makeup sex and things, and yelling and whatnot, and all of that sort of thing going together, all that mangling together that you only really get upset with someone you deeply care for, because other people you're indifferent to, whatever they do or don't do.
Totally.
And then we also have courage in crisis, where you are strong in the face of what are these ghastly things that you're hearing, that someone's a murderer and you think, I never knew, or whatever.
It might be a great placement for emergency surgery or emergency nursing, or someone who goes in and helps people who are overdosing and applies the whatever that called naloxone, whatever the
Naxo.
Naxo.
I don't have it.
I don't know, but yes, one of those people, a crisis worker.
Yes, and the EpiPen person, and who's going to do it? Well, they're
Exactly.
And then of course sexual energy. There's no doubt that this is a strong position for Mars.
Yeah.
To have drive and passion in the bedroom. So, that's a great place. Do you have any of these planets in your 8th house?
I've got Saturn in the 8th.
Okay, well, we'll get to that. Fun.
Ooh, fun
So let's have a look now at Jupiter in their 8th house. So some keywords I have here is growth through transformation. That as you go through these life-changing things of, like perhaps when your mother dies or something, you come out you grow through it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy. These things never are, or a terrible thing, or if your child dies, grow through transformation.
Yeah.
So you personally can grow as a person when you face these very challenging things, even like the tax man or whatever.
Yeah.
You're paying attention to these things. They're not just passing you by on a wet Wednesday,
Yeah. And it could be abundance. You could abundance of
money,
resources, or sex even.
Yes,
big partners, whatever.
It's coming to you.
Yeah.
And philosophical depth.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that one. That not particularly philosophical, but exploring these things and going deep and being super knowledgeable. It's the broad planet going deep.
Yeah.
So you're going deep in your subject.
This person does not shy away from dark topics,
Yes.
subject matter.
Yes.
Yeah, the taboo, anything like that.
The taboo stuff, yeah. And then we get to our favourite one, Saturn in the 8th house.
Yeah.
So some keywords I have here is a serious approach to transformation.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about this? Did you take it seriously when you made your transformation?
I mean, if we're talking about like the fitness, yeah.
I am.
Yeah. Definitely.
When I met you, you were the epitome of a couch potato. And you look fine.
Rude, so rude.
I'm so sorry. But you didn't, honestly, you didn't lift a finger, did you?
I know, and I would joke about, going outside or exercise.
I know.
LOL, yeah. So.
And it was just, and then what happened? Something occurred, a transformation.
Yeah.
And the next thing I see, you're fit as a fiddle, doing the stairs, looking back, glowing.
No, thanks.
So, outdoorsy, skating up the street like, I don't know what.
Yeah.
What do you think was that? What was the catalyst for that?
It was my partner. He went through a transformation, and he had also been a couch potato for a while, and had been depressed after the death of his parents. And it happened like a decade earlier, and he had just kind of been in a, I wouldn't say depression in the clinical sense, but just kind of
under a pole.
And we sort of hibernated together for
hibernated. Yes,
we really. I mean, and I was happy to cocoon with him because we are deeply in love and just soulmates, and that was fine. But then he started playing hockey again, which he had done all his life as a child, like literally, like the classic picture of like the 3-year-old kid on the skates, like that was him. And he played junior hockey in high school, and blah blah blah, and then didn't for like 15 years. And when he got back into it, it was all go. It was just fitness, hockey, and he, of course, getting back in shape to do that. Like, hockey is not just like, you're gonna play a little, baseball, like bowling, whatever. It's exhausting. It is incredibly
but he too
physically exhausting.
He has changed his
transformed
physique
massively. Yeah, and when I saw that this was happening, I know I've told the story a couple of times on the podcast, but yeah, just in brief, I looked up one day from playing my computer game at the same desk that I had been working all day, like just completely seated at the same chair for 12 to whatever hours a day. I looked up and he was like all fit and tan all of a sudden, and he'd just come back from playing tennis because hockey wasn't on because it was summer. And I'm like, what the, I need to do something.
Because I do know when I first met you guys, 12 odd years ago, he was a little generously proportioned back then. But now he's fit.
Very, yeah. And I was like, wow, I even jokingly called him Fitness Boy, and he was like, fitness is life. If you look, fitness means life. It means fitness to live, like the survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival. This is, exactly. 8th house, it's survival. And I was like, okay. What could I do? And then
and you triggered that Saturn, and you took a serious approach. And my goodness.
I discovered roller skating, and then when I couldn't roller skate because it rains, half the year here, I took to the stairwell in our building, and Yep.
Yeah.
It's not like I don't know. Yeah, it is definitely, that was a Saturn mission on my part. It was like, and it wasn't about denial either. It was just about discipline. And then changing it into something that I wanted, as opposed to just like.
And you relish doing it.
Some of the skating, yeah. The stairs I never, look forward to. It's always like, oh God, the stairs, because it's raining. But I listen to audiobooks the whole time, or podcasts, so I've always got something in my head and take my mind off it.
Amazing, so, but you keep going. You're not lying there and saying, "No, I can't make it today."
Exactly.
So some other keywords we have for Saturn in the 8th house is emotional resilience. I don't know how you feel about that. That you have been able to withstand. The rigors of.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who.
A survivor.
I will be a great person in a crisis. I'm a great friend to have if you're going through a crisis. I've shown that to be true in many situations.
Amazing.
Including the previously mentioned cocooning decade.
Yes.
Whatever's required.
So let's have a look now at Uranus in the 8th house. So some keywords I have is sudden changes.
Yeah.
Because suddenly without warning, things happened here. Innovative ideas, which really would come, but I want to say innovative ideas through change, through the transformation, fresh ideas spring forth.
Yeah.
The phoenix bit here.
Yeah, or even in the topics of death and taxes and money and,
Yes.
and resources and sex and all those.
Yes, you're going to have to change your ways and stop
Right.
spending all your money. You must pay your taxes or
this-
whatever it
the
is.
person who invented, Bitcoin or whatever maybe
Yes.
had, Uranus in the 8th house, technology of
Yes,
whatever. Yeah.
exactly. Of resources, yeah.
Or some, innovative new way to do burials in space or something.
Right.
Those
Things have changed.
death technology.
Yes.
Yeah. Plastination. Look it up.
And then revolution in intimacy. So they really want a little bit of something different now. So
Right.
whatever that means, that's Uranus in the 8th house.
Check your partner's charts.
Exactly. I mean, I don't have anything in the 8th house, so I'm pretty confident laying all this out there for you guys.
Right.
And then Neptune in the 8th house, we've got spiritual transformation.
Yep.
They meet God and it changes, or what do they say? You come to Jesus moment.
Right.
That's the 8th house.
Yep.
Mystical experiences, very, very similar.
Yep.
And financial uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because this is, unfortunately, the one where they say, oh, well, when my father dies, I'm inheriting the house. And it turns out he actually gave it to someone else 10 years ago. And and this happened in my family.
Oh, God.
And it was, someone was anticipating receiving the inheritance of the house when the father died, and then actually it went to the son because he'd bought the house off him 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it just was, it was the talk for the year about this whole thing that went down.
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
financial uncertainty. So you do need to be paying attention to that. Also, when you've got this Neptune in the 8th house, you don't know how much debt you owe. You've got credit cards coming left, right, and centre, and you've got no clue. So you need to get on it.
It's like the opposite of having Neptune in the 2nd house, which
Yes.
I have. And that's the one where you don't know where the money's coming in from often, and you kind of don't want to know. You're just like, as long as I have enough, I'm happy, whatever.
Neptune in the 8th house, they don't know how much they owe.
Yeah.
Which can be a problem too.
For sure. And I would also think Neptune in the 8th house could be transformation through substances, drugs, alcohol, and all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, of course, yes. So where do you draw the line, you see?
Right.
If you take too much of anything, it's going to be the end of you,
Like
isn't
Oscar
it?
Wilde said, moderation in everything, including moderation.
Oh, did he say?
He says one of my
I do
favorites.
like Oscar Wilde.
Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah.
He's very good.
Yeah.
And then how about Pluto in the 8th house? Now, this is its natural house. It's the natural ruler here. Profound transformation.
Yeah.
That through your life, you will evolve almost into something else. And the caterpillar butterfly thing will keep happening for you.
Yep.
Power and control. So this is a very strong position. Pluto's well placed here, and it's probably going to want to control the resources of others too, and their own resources, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, just straight up regeneration. So this is putting your DNA out for the next generation. But this is how we get through, isn't it? You know?
I wonder if Elon Musk has this placement.
Well, I don't know. You're actually going, the urge, the primal urge to procreate, to leave your children behind you and keep the human race going.
To make a mark on the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Pluto in the 8th house. It's the primal urges. And this is, we'll talk about this a bit when we're going to do a thing about the 12th house. But this is one of those things where you actually want to leave your mark, and you will, in some way or other, that goes on after you're dead.
Right.
That lives on. What's the word for that? That lives
Legacy.
On? A legacy.
Yeah.
A legacy.
For sure.
Yes, where it actually, your legacy, good, bad, or indifferent, will be remembered.
Yeah.
So, it's quite a powerful position, and you can do good.
Yeah.
You can do good. That's Pluto in the 8th houses.
Nice.
Okay, so we've had a bit of a dive into the 8th house. It's the first house-specific podcast episode we've done, and we're starting with, I want to say, the deeper, darker, more meaningful house that's got a million things in it that really, as you say, are taboo and topics that we all face at some time in our lives. If you're a consulting astrologer, your clients will come to you with issues with 8th house things, and they may not want to talk about it, but it's there. You can see it in the chart. Mm-hmm. So anyway, if you found value in this episode, please do consider sharing it with somebody who would be interested. You can send us a text if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify by clicking the link in the show notes, and it will text us straight up if you want to give some commentary about this episode or ask your questions to us. Yeah. Please follow Arwynne at her website.
MsPink.net, that's MSPINK.net.
And Arwynne is talking about current affairs
and books and movies and
TVs. Yeah, great stuff going on there. And astrology, yes, of course. So that's great. So do follow Arwynne too. Also, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter that you can sign up at starzology.com/newsletter. We issue out every Sunday to over 1,000 people at this stage, aspiring astrologers. We talk about astrology and what's going on and what's happening in our lives and so on, but it's mainly astrology, definitely for sure, and certainly do sign up there. You can also get some freebies if you go to starzology.com/freebies. I've got some templates and interesting things for astrologers, and do avail yourself of those as well because they're complimentary. Yeah. So Arwynne, I just want to thank you for coming along again for this 8th house episode. Yes. I think this is a topic that we can schedule in later because we could definitely go a lot deeper on several of these topics
for sure.
One day in the future. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. This has been great. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there, or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.